Yeah, perfect. Hey, everyone. Brendan Stufley, current director of CPFR and primarily focused on helping these customer supply chain teams understand a little bit more about BOPS, but first we'll jump into, maybe my CPG experience that got me here. A few of the logos you see here at the bottom is after transitioning from Navy Supply Corps. Um, in 2008, I joined Kraft in a customer service um, center and moved in through customer service roles, demand planning, and into sales analytics when the organization split into Mondelez. And then maybe circa 2013, 2014 to 2016-ish is when I was at SC Johnson, which I believe one or two of the folks there at SC Johnson Global. I had the chance to actually go out to Argentina and meet the team there at the time that was focused on customer supply chain. And back then, the gentleman I met with was very helpful in understanding many of the businesses there. And we went out to Mexico together to help with the pest control season, very specific CPFR analyst type work to give you depth at the same time of having Walmart International responsibility. And then the last 8 years, I was at Kimberly Clark, with 5 years of that being one of the team leaders for Sam's Club and Walmart, overseeing the customer supply chain team and the relationship with Walmart. Also, the global capabilities, similar to BOPS, reviewing internationally. Is there a need for technology to help prove the efficiency and effectiveness in order to help standardize our processes across? Before joining BOPS um, in July of 2024. So
I love it. I love it. Well, and on my side, so I'm Usman and I work with Brennan to kind of build our strategy and our business in Northwest Arkansas. So him and I are a tag team that's working to help suppliers not only from their customer supply chain digitization journey, but also kind of hosting events and workshops, whether that's in person or whether that's virtual workshops like this one, to provide resources that we think are often either passed down either by tribal knowledge within teams or not really passed down at all. And so, there's an entire new generation of supply chain and customer supply chain leaders that are coming into their own at these very well-known suppliers. And we believe it's a great opportunity for this generation to have access to a lot more resources that can help them get up to speed and also challenge some of the old traditional ways of doing things and see how things could be done differently. So without further ado, Brennan, I'll turn to our main topics and we can get started. So like I mentioned earlier in the call, the main focus for today is the customer supply chain. But one thing that we've seen, Brennan, is not a lot of people are able to clearly define or even recognize what is the customer supply chain team or function, let alone what its role is and what its value is to the business. So, could you kind of help define and structure that for the audience?
yeah, absolutely. We know that there are several different ways. There's no, hey, this is the only way to enable um, customer supply chain type work within an organization.
Mhm.
And each level of resources or how many are different, which is why through today and then as a follow-up to this session will likely be, hey, how do we go deeper? But it'll be start to understand and help assess and provide a framework for you to assess where you're at today, but where we see the market in the future. And when we speak to customer supply chain team, this is specific to the team that owns the relationships with a particular retailer or group of retailers. That is a supply chain analyst or type questions. This is where usually the type of work that isn't just customer service or order management, can include order management, but is
Mhm.
also responsible for the analytical work and the communication back with a retailer with regards to maybe future forecast or future orders, promotion planning. Also, the respective maybe what is the current performance with revolves around in stock inventory health, and these type of measures where it's specific to the retailer and acts as a liaison then back inside the organization as a stakeholder to many constituents, and that being primarily maybe the local customer sales or commercial team.
Mm-hmm.
Other audience members are maybe it's the transportation team to know, hey, we have orders, this many trucks. Expectation change may be different than a previous engagement. It can
Mm-hmm.
also be your supply planning and also your demand planning organization they speak back to. And certainly even within this customer service or order management, where they're getting those maybe two different relationships with the retailer, right? Someone that processes orders, but someone that is doing the settings for forecasting may impact future orders. They're helping coordinate this in a very specific, why I say keep saying it, the customer and the retailer specifics, but also this team interacts, may have some responsibility or all responsibility in some organizations with revolves what I call logistics type help, meaning they are more are inclusive of on time and full deliveries is comprised within customer supply chain teams, whether or not you're shipping in the correct multiples or some kind of efficiency, meaning in layers and pallets, how to improve cost to serve
Mm-hmm.
can be included in customer supply chain teams. And as I'm framing this, this is for you to know that you're usually a subset of maybe a bigger supply chain in your organization, but
Mm-hmm.
this group is very has work that maybe other teams inside a supply chain don't have, like the very detailed customer specific, and it could be different for servicing a large retailer in your region versus
Yep.
maybe the number 10 account in your region, right? Those are two different levels of sophistication and how many resources would be there. And this is why we say both of those may have customer supply chain support, but
Right.
where we are talking about a team is where you're going to have more than one person, i.e., maybe a person that's an analyst level, but then a manager overseeing this role where you have a legitimate team of people, not just maybe one person out doing work on behalf of a team. The value this provides is certainly somewhat intuitive, and we'll
Mhm.
get into that, but how can you communicate back into the organization the current state of supply chain and ordering and replenishment fulfillment needs, plus
Mhm.
have an insight into the future planning? This is a very key role in order for you to get product on the shelf at the right time and the right quantities, and certainly be able to continue to have that um, ongoing trust and leadership with a retail partner.
I love it. I think that's it's a great summary and overview of what a customer supply chain function or a role is. Now my question for you will be if we divide it into that people, process, and technology bucket, how are you seeing the maturity levels of some of the organizations that we've spoken and worked with in terms of their customer supply chain, and like how is that evolving based on your experience having worked at the supplier as we mentioned earlier in the call, and now all the suppliers that we're kind of working with and seeing, them designing or structuring their people, process, and technology around customer supply chain.
Yeah, great question, Usman. I think when you brought it up in the question, but for the audience, maybe it's even easier if you even write this down on a sheet of paper as you're following, right? Is write down on the left side and say people, process, technology, and then data as maybe a fourth bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And each of these four areas is where you're going to be evaluating where am I as the brand or the CPG organization? Where is my retail partner that I'm speaking with? We're going to speak maybe in one retail partner, or it could be multiple retail partners that's within your team's purview. And then where am I today versus where do I need to be to have the optimal organization to reach where we'd say, peak performance, or based on budget, what performance I can achieve based on the budget, whether that's people or money that I've been given to
Mm-hmm.
satisfy that. And so when I talk about people, before I get into considerations for optimizing team structure, you'll know that there's many things to consider, but in this instance, we're only talking about each phase and maybe how can you frame it to establish some level of maturity. And where I like to say is understanding maybe where you're at, but what is maturity for people? And when I get into this, it's when you're hiring new personnel for a junior analyst position, what's the
Mhm.
expectation for that level of work? Does
Yeah.
that level of work meet a base guideline for you to keep the lights on, for you to maintain your KPIs at goal, right?
Mhm.
Can we
Mhm.
achieve goal level? And can we achieve that with a junior analyst, or do we need someone with 1 to 3 years experience?
Mhm.
Still junior, but maybe not entry level junior. So that's where I'd say on the left side of the maturity scale. And then as you're progressing, the maturity of the person will change with what do you need to drive for the output, but what are the internal processes and technology you have will also indicate your person. So you can't make the decision solely based on I have a rock star analyst or I have a rock star interpersonal skilled person. Let me change my process to match their needs,
Yeah.
right? These things are never going to be lined up perfect for long. We understand that, but understanding the framework of that they work together is kind of the intention of how I'm framing this. So I just wanted to give the starting point of each one so that we can come back and understand maybe how you can connect them when you're optimizing. Is that
Mhm.
on the left end, and then on the right end is you have a multi-years been working with a retailer. You have multiple people that is fluent in that retailer's lingo. They have been with the organization for 3 to 5 years, so they can speak back inside your organization and have influence and trust. That is a much more mature to where your processes and technology can change, and that person would very quickly within 30 days be able to adopt a new process, adopt a new technology, change how they access the data, and still do their work and then build incrementality. That would be, call it in the middle and to the right on the maturity scale
Mhm.
based on that journey. As far as that's people, so from beginning up through someone that can take on new work and then continue to build on that incrementally is where I'd say is on the right side. There's a blend of that in the future that you will need, and I'll speak more to that. Next is process. When I say
Yeah.
process, it's the standard work and maybe the work you would expect on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and it be a cadence that's expected of your stakeholders. So your commercial team expects a particular report to come out. Your replenishment manager or inventory analyst at the retailer expects a particular exception report or business update, or if you do a promotion, follow this template. If you do a demand update to a forecast lift, follow this template. These are examples of processes.
Mhm.
And based on the maturity of your retail relationship or the retailer itself will dictate, is this the kind of place where you have one meeting every month? You send a monthly update or you send a weekly update. They do not have biweekly meetings with you. They don't really have a collaborative back and forth partnership. Well, then this
Mhm.
is where you would have low maturity. And then you would start to align your processes and your resources based on that process. And then to the right side of that is you have a very busy schedule of every Monday, here's the three things. Tuesday, you're doing these. You have internal meetings, you have follow-ups, meaning the analyst has what I would say is a full desk managing that retailer relationship or just a portion of that retailer's business. Then you're talking high maturity on process.
Mhm.
Maybe your processes are not mature in themselves, but the need for the processes is mature. And that's what we're talking here. Your processes, there's a little difference. Usman, you can ask your clarifying question, but go ahead.
No, no. I was just gonna ask that specific question. Like, why is that so important? Why is the process component so important? That's part one of my question. And part two is, can you define a little bit for the audience what this need for a more mature process would look like? Like, how can they recognize that if they're listening to you right now and they're doing some introspection on their own team and their own sort of organization?
Yeah, and I say that when I say the process, there
Mhm.
is a need because your audience, your stakeholders are seeking information and insights.
Yeah.
Then that's the output of a process. And many times we are stuck on making sure the person follows the cadence versus is the work they're doing efficient and also effective. And that's what I mean by your process being more mature is when does both of those things. It becomes more efficient and it becomes more effective. That can be through visibility or clarity to what you're presenting. That can be the template that you create is more automated, not say by itself, but becomes you send it to a person, they know you're going to do it on a certain time, and then they send it back, meaning you've orchestrated, not automated, orchestrated the process in a way that's more clear for the people around you to move it along. These are the where I'd say the difference in maturity of the process versus just saying you're busy doing work every day.
Mhm.
And I want to quickly get into technology because one of them is there's technology and then how you use it, right? So the maturity level of technology can be, hey, do you use Excel? Are you using email only? Do you have internal team groups to allow you to speak across planning and commercial? Meaning, are all the people that are in a process on a communication together? Are they disparate? And
Mhm.
this is where I say their technology enables your process. It doesn't define your process. It
Mhm.
enables your process, but it also enables you to be both more efficient and more effective. And I think that taking the technology in this instance, since we're talking retailer data in this
Mhm.
instance, let's say we'll go to the fourth bucket data. Does the
Mhm.
retailer share data at a granular level that requires you to consume massive rows of information and then glean insights and make decisions? That would be high maturity, right?
Yeah.
That they are sharing data for you to digest and for you, and there's an expectation that you use that data.
Yeah.
Well, then that changes what technology you need or don't need at a certain level, you can use Excel, you can use internal, maybe Tableau or Power BI. In some instances, you may need to procure more robust technology to digest the information and house it in a data lake
Mhm.
in these different data warehouses across commercial and category and supply chain teams. Like there's a
Mhm.
complicated orchestration, but it could be just for your team. I only need Excel because we only have two customers that do this.
Yeah.
But within Excel, how do you share that information is where I mean by also technology, right? Is how are you enabling the others around you to grasp the insights? Low maturity is you just send an email on Monday that's a screenshot of a pivot table, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But everyone's getting the information.
Yes.
High maturity is you have a weekly meeting to go over the results with the three main stakeholders, and everyone has access to the SharePoint that has the pivot table where they can provide feedback, right? That's what I
Mhm.
mean by understanding where you are and defining it. As we walk through each of these four areas, the key moment is two areas. One is my organization committed to understanding the retailer
Mhm.
and relying on this type of information within the customer supply chain? Yes or no, right? Yes, like high, right? High maturity for needing it. Number two, are my stakeholders valuing this, not just as an organizational level, but the actual people on the front lines that I communicate with?
Mhm.
Is their role also, hey, every week I need to know your forecast changes, analyst on the desk. Okay, well, let's have a meeting. Commercial team, same thing. Once a month, I need to know your updated business call and I want to coordinate with you.
Mhm.
Each week, I want to know our on-shelf position. Now you have some mature need or business need. Then you need to align how much maturity of the analysts, the processes, the technology, and the data to align with that business need. So creating all that work without the business need will also um, cause you to be out of alignment, right? Meaning you'll be spending too much money and too much time building these resources for no apparent gain
Mhm.
in the structure. So that's where we are today, Usman. If you want to maybe lead me towards the taking action or
Yeah,
driving progress, maybe we can share an
absolutely.
example or a case study.
Only thing that I'll say here is you've given me an idea. I think we should prepare a resource to share not only with the audience that's here, but also the wider community that's focused on this matrix that you just described. I think it will be a good resource for them to kind of benchmark where they are today and where there might be opportunities for them to improve across those four buckets. So that's something that I think we should work on after this webinar.
Yeah, that's good. Now that I guess is each time you maybe say something similar to this, but what I've come to see is how can we speak to a framework to help us drive meaningful conversations, and then that's how we better share across in the industry as well, right? So I think that one of the key things is, hey, how can we give a better assessment and keep it simple? It's a handful of boxes across each key area and then have a more detailed conversation about, hey, how do I optimize that structure based on my specific needs? Because some
Mhm.
teams can be embedded within the retailer, meaning the commercial team and supply chain team report to the same leader. That structure is likely to be different than maybe a organization that structures a more national or regional approach that says, hey, we're going to have a director overseeing with two managers that have 8 key accounts.
Mhm.
Now we want to standardize how we share in stocks, inventory levels, and forecasts across 8 customers. That's going to require a different coordination, a different maturity, and different the people in order to perform than just the one person performing better inside their sales organization to drive improvement of out of stocks, right? So
Yeah.
using that assessment, that is a good next action is to say, hey, let's share this out, have some people come back to us, and then have those one-on-one consultations to give feedback specific to your organization.
Yes, yes, yes. By the way, I'm having a very good time kind of enjoying this knowledge that you're sharing. So I'm assuming that we're going to be going over maybe 5 more minutes than scheduled, so 1:35 if you will. I do want to be cognizant of people's time who have joined us. So if you're able to stay, we would love to have you throughout the call. If you have to drop, that's totally understandable, and we'll share the recording with you. But I don't want to cut us off because I think the knowledge that you're sharing is super valuable. On your last point about some sort of actionable takeaway for the audience as they can take a look at that framework that we'll share, what are some other considerations that folks should have in mind as they're thinking about optimizing their customer supply chain team function or structure? Is there any sort of success story or any anecdotes that you have in mind that that you can share that could be helpful for the audience?
Yeah, one area here in Usman, we didn't even maybe pre-discuss this, but I do think that there is where's my team structure and defining who is your team. So just how we started the call today about what is customer supply chain. One of them is defining this value, not just your strategic value, meaning the theory of how you're helping your organization win. But one of the key areas where we're seeing is how do you internally celebrate and define how you're winning in your own organization today.
Hmm.
So I think that might be another prelude into like why do you exist? And then part of that is how do you continue to communicate your value to your organization that this team is providing and be able to communicate why you may need to invest in the people or invest in technology. But usually our processes for customer supply chain are not only supply chain people. We need the commercial teams to participate. We need demand planning to participate. We need the retailer to participate. Well, why do they need to participate? Typically, what I found is the ability to report or clearly define the value of a customer supply chain team has been a gap. And I don't know if a few of the few Jennifer Wan or David may agree with this, but I think this is also an opportunity that we're seeing for the evolution of this next gen customer supply chain is saying, hey, here's why we matter, here's where we drive value, and here's why we need investment, and here's why we need a team.
Hmm.
That has also been a gap in the current like previous
Hmm.
past. current state, some teams are doing this, but there is still a lack of a clear way to demonstrate that value add to the organization.
Brennan, if I'm a CPFR manager or CPFR analyst, because what you're describing is exactly what I've heard on a call actually this morning. So if I'm a CPFR manager or CPFR analyst listening to this workshop and I'm resonating with what you're saying, that it's hard for me to easily communicate or show the value to my other stakeholders. What are like one or two things that you think this person can do, some action that they can take to actually change that? I know this might be going a little deeper into what we were talking about, but I think it's a super valuable point because we hear this quite often from CVFR and customer supply chain teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we as supply chain people, we usually get tied up in the what are we doing to help in developing the processes, not necessarily um, reporting the news or taking credit for the work we do. And many times it's because what you're doing is preventing a maybe a bad behavior from being seen. And so since you took the action, no one knows that there was a problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because you're not adding an incremental sale per se. You changed through the analyst, you convinced them or influenced them to place an order manually, or you convinced them to raise the forecast. And so the system behaved and was able to get the product to the shelf, and it's sold at a similar rate this week that it's been selling for the last 4 weeks because
Mm-hmm.
you took the proactive action,
Yeah.
which you were able to do because you have the existing processes and you take the weekly meeting serious and you do the work, but no one gives you credit for performing and having the goal 98% in stock. When in reality, had you not had your processes in place, maybe it would have fell to 96% for 2 weeks until it became an exception, and then you fixed it. You prevented the exception.
Yeah.
So how do you take credit for being consistent and delivering the goals? This is a challenge on how do you say what you're delivering, and
Mm-hmm.
then setting the aspirational goals. I say these are things that maybe internally you have to have two sets of things that you're after. One being the work and the value of just doing everything to maintain goal, and then what
Mm-hmm.
is the aspirational goal? And those have to be more granular in nature and clearly defined and shared. It's a difficult position to be in to say you did great work when you didn't tell people that there's likely to be great work to be had if you can improve your forecast accuracy, if you can improve reorder points with the retailer. You want to prelude to that so that way when you do get enough trust and you do get a good analyst on the retail side and they actually take your recommendations, you want to be able to take credit for that big win, not when the win comes, but you have to start um, letting those around you, your stakeholders, know this is what you're working towards. Because sometimes you're going to need their help to achieve that. In fact, most instances, everyone will need each other to achieve big wins. And so I think this is part of it is how do we continue to track value and constantly have an aspirational goal specific to customer supply chain to use value add.
I'm seeing this as another workshop topic for the future where we go a little deeper into maybe on a role by role basis where like, if you're a manager or if you're an analyst or even if you are a director in the customer supply chain or CPFR function, how do you communicate and how do you show to not only your internal teams, but I think to the entire organization what value the customer supply chain is driving? Because like I said earlier, this is something that we've heard quite often about team members having as a challenge, and I think there's an opportunity to kind of help them and kind of use the best practices that we're seeing from some of our customers, for example, and share those with the with the wider community.
Yeah,
All right.
awesome.
So go ahead, Brian. You gonna
No, I
say
was gonna say
something?
awesome. Yeah, we're at the good time to close up.
I'm seeing something in the chat from David Wells. I'll read this, Brennan, and I'll love to get your perspective. So David Wells said traditional functional supply chain leaders may not understand the value of customer supply chain and sales, and will think customer supply chain as something that they can kind of load everything off to, or or kind of give the tasks that like no one else might be taking. The key is to show how the actions taken by the customer supply chain team has generated sales through better supply chain performance. The most mature customer supply chain teams will take supply chain topics and issues out of the sales buyer conversation and enhance the overall customer relationship. What are your thoughts there, Brennan? Thank you,
Yeah,
David, for your.
absolutely. I think that this is the key enabler of whenever you're able to not talk about key supply chain, whether that's fill rate or on-time delivery or one big error that you had 3 weeks ago, remove it and more focus on how you're enabling the organization to meet current goals. And then what are you driving in the future? That's why I was alluding to sharing your big idea and your big aspirational goal, because typically you need the not only the replenishment inventory analyst at a retailer, you're going to need the buyer, which means you're going to need your commercial team. When all four of you are working together, this is where you get the biggest unlocks for the business. And there's several examples of this where you can coordinate to change product flow, change holding capacity on the shelf, get settings for a larger percentage of max shelf, which then increases the instances of having more inventory on the shelf, which generally increases sales. These type
Mhm.
of coordinated efforts are where you get bigger wins and more visibility to this customer supply chain team and that
Mhm.
key strategic value that you offer.
I love it. I love it. All right. Moving right along. So for point number four. So this is, I know, something that you're really passionate about. In terms of the role and also the impact of data and technology as we look at the customer supply chain function as a whole. I know you mentioned earlier during the call, one of the lens that the audience should look at this maturity assessment or their status quo from is on a customer level, but also on a more organization or global level. But if we're looking specifically at the customer level and honing on the data that they're sharing, for example, or the technology capabilities that might be required to manage the customer supply chain relationship with that particular customer, how should they think about the role of those two components within this dynamic? And what are some opportunities to further assess where they are on that maturity scale?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll know where you're at because you'll be struggling to perform, right?
Mhm.
So if you have a retailer sharing data and you're not fully leveraging the data, you're likely being bombarded with questions and feel inadequate to answer the questions in a timely manner, or not able to get to as many data points as you wish if you have a survey of your team of what do they wish they can do. And typically I like to start with, if you have this data and you have what you believe to be a capability to help drive that performance, is you need to ask the stakeholders, are they receiving from you what they would expect? Is a good point. That usually gives you your what do I need to do better, both from process and how do I enable data and technology to drive that process to be more efficient and effective.
I like it. I like it. And t- to wrap up and kind of close the loop on this discussion that we've had, which by the way, everyone who showed up to the webinar is still here. So I think that's a pretty good leading or lagging indicator of the value that we're sharing. But in terms of for the audience, if they're walking away with three things from today's workshop, what are those three things, and how could those help the audience take action to start making some progress in the right direction?
Yeah, one, I mean, I would say is, take your blank sheet of paper and go through each of those four big buckets and give
Mm-hmm.
yourself an honest assessment about where you are today and
Mm-hmm.
then where would you want to be, um, 6 months or a year from now, in order to achieve the goals that have been set by your organization. That's one. Number two is, can I define my value? What does my team do and how do I quantify it? Man,
Mm-hmm.
I wish I can do better at this, and here's the gap I have. what's your gap, and then go out in the industry, whether that's the folks like us or peers that we can connect you with, to have
Mhm.
other conversations with other teammates in your same position to get feedback on how they tackle the problem. Do not try to solve this on your own. And then lastly is be more inquisitive with your stakeholders about what they expect from you. So you can define where you're at in maturity, you can understand your value, but who are you telling it to and who are you collaborating with? Go to your retail partner at that retailer X, go to your commercial team, go to your planning organization, and ask them to also provide feedback on maybe a couple of specific processes. How are they getting value from you? What value do they get or not get from you? This will help you better define that framework for moving forward to optimize your structure.
I love it. I love it. Any any questions from the audience before we close off today's workshop? I personally learned a lot, and I hope you guys did it as well. But if you still have any questions or any points of clarification, this is the opportunity. I know we went a little bit over time, but because you stayed with us, I I do want to see if anyone has any questions or any comments.
Yeah, thanks for giving this opportunity, Usman, to share, and also to know that each of you can certainly reach out to me directly via email, and set up time to talk and answer questions in a more personal manner as well.
Absolutely. And I'll say the last thing from my side is that I see that the audience that we have today is not just US focused, meaning we have people from LATAM and we have someone from Europe as well. And the beautiful thing about the customer supply chain function is that it exists across different markets. It's not just the US idea or concept. It's very pertinent in Mexico and LATAM. It's very pertinent in Europe. So I think there's a lot more workshops that we need to do to provide this type of knowledge and value to this community. So for those of you who are in the US, obviously, there's more to come from a virtual and in-person events. But even for those who are outside of the US, we have you guys in our mind, and we're gonna make sure that we create content and resources that are helpful for you as well. So look out for those throughout 2025. There's a lot more to come.
All
All
right,
right.
thanks.
Thanks, Brennan. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.